You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Monster House presents.
Monster Talk's a proud member of the Airwave Media Podcast Network, home of such shows as Subtext, The Projection Booth, and the Daily Meditation Podcast. If you'd like to advertise on this show, contact sales at advertisecast.com.
It's actually quite unlike anything we've ever seen before.
A giant, hairy creature, part ape, part man.
In Loch Ness, a 24-mile-long bottomless lake in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a creature known as the Loch Ness Monster.
Monster Talk.
Welcome to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
I grew up hooked on documentaries. As a teen, I would plan my evenings around PBS shows, especially on Sunday night when they would show the series Nature, which often featured repackaged content from the BBC. Sometimes I would even stay up late and be tired on Monday mornings at school because I'd been binging documentaries past a sensible bedtime. One time, this actually paid off pretty well when I had stayed up quite late and ended up falling asleep in biology, which was an early part of my school day. I woke up with the teacher calling me out for sleeping. "Mr. Smith, if you know so much about Venus flytraps that you think it's okay to sleep through the lesson, why don't you tell the class about them?" Now, normally, this is where a student should be apologizing for sleeping in class, snap to attention, and begin to take hyper-attentive notes for a bit until the fierce eye of the teacher passes on to other matters. But guess what the previous night's documentary had been about? So I stood up and gave a fact-filled summary of the nature of carnivorous plants. I talked about the triggering mechanism for what brings the specialized leaves together when they trap prey. I described the digestive process, related species, and everything I could recall about them, which was enough that when I finished, my teacher stared at me for a moment before saying maybe the greatest thing a teacher's ever told me: "Excellent summary. You may go back to sleep." We talk about so many monsters on this show that are biologically implausible, but I also love it when we're able to discuss real-world animals that have become monsterized by culture. We can't resurrect dinosaurs, but there are very large birds in some countries that certainly approximate some of the ecological niches that used to be filled by dinosaurs. And yes, current thinking is that birds are the descendants of dinosaurs, and it shouldn't take much convincing for that idea if you come face to face with the subject of this week's episode, the cassowary. We're pleased today to talk with Steve Portugal about these amazing and often misunderstood creatures.
Monster Talk.
Sure. So my name's Steve Portugal. I'm a biologist, zoologist, academic at Royal Holloway University of London, and I've had a childhood, or since childhood, obsession with animals, which I've been able to turn into a job, which is ACE. And I've been studying birds for about 20 years now, and my job entails teaching students, doing research, and hopefully trying to help animals in the wild to cope with the crazy amount of environmental change that they're experiencing.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And Steve, I came across an article that you had partly written and had been interviewed for, in which you were called Stuart instead of Steve,
Yes.
which was interesting. But you were talking about a creature that has fascinated me for a very long time from my home country, Australia. And we've had lots of queries about this animal over the years, and that's the cassowary. And it seems like you're as interested in this creature, or even more than us. But we wanted to bring you on to talk about this bird and just how amazing it is, this dinosaur-like creature. So can we just start with a little bit of information about cassowaries and what they look like and how big they are, their diet, where you can find them, that kind of thing?
They are certainly special birds, and they're so unique. And when you visit Australia and you visit regions where cassowaries are found, you feel the pride from the people that live there for these enigmatic creatures that you don't really find anywhere else in the world. So cassowaries are these group of flightless birds called doratites, which are often referred to as kind of the ancient birds, that sort of one of the first birds as we know it today to kind of emerge, if you like, from for many, many years ago. And they are striking for their size. Adult cassowaries can be up to 6 feet tall. So they truly look you in the eye when you're stood in front of them. And they can weigh up to around 45 to 50 kilograms. So they are packing quite a punch. And ironically, I guess, for something that is so large, most of the time their diet consists of fruit, and more fruit. And where they're found throughout Australia, or rather the tropics of Australia and Papua New Guinea, they eat around 230 to 240 different fruits, different plant species. And in these regions, they're actually the main seed distributor. So they're basically like pillars of the ecosystem. They are distributing all these different species and all these seeds around the environment, and they are the primary sort of seed distributor. So we look at them and think, wow, aren't they amazing? But they also have this incredibly important role in the ecosystem. And without them, you start to see real issues with forest biodiversity, and it starts to all go a bit wrong. So they're pretty special birds for so many reasons.
Let me reiterate what Karen said earlier about thank you for joining us for all our cassowaries. These are beautiful and colorful birds, but they've got this very strange structure on their head. And I've seen it written, but I've never heard it spoken. Is it pronounced casque?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. I take it there's some, I don't want to say controversy, but some mystery around what exactly its role is. And I'm always curious about how people sort of figure these things out. Is it serving some, survival biological need, or is it a sexual selection thing? Is it for cooling? Is it for acoustics? What do you know what the latest is on what this is probably for? And I'm not saying it's a single purpose, biology, but obviously evolution multi-purposes wherever it can.
I think controversy, is a fair word. Actually, certainly has caused people to disagree quite vehemently on this. So as you say, one of the ideas is that it acted like a sound resonator. So cassowaries and the males that do this sort of territorial mating call, they have this amazing low frequency call that can travel for miles, and it's sort of on a level where if you stood near them, you feel it in your stomach, like you're being at a really loud gig or a concert by the speaker. It rumbles in your tummy. And it was thought that this casque may have helped to do that, a bit like it's thought that it helps sperm whales increase the sort of the sound that they create, and perhaps how dinosaurs, like the duck-billed dinosaurs, Parasaurolophus, etc., it's thought they used a similar head design to create the sound. Then it was suggested it stopped them getting smacked in the face when they were sort of moving at speed through this dense rainforest. But as you've alluded to, the current thinking is actually it's to do with some elements of thermoregulation. It's got this kind of bizarre and fascinating spongy structure inside it. And what studies have shown using infrared cameras, looking at the heat signal, that different parts of the casque can lose more heat at different times. So it looks like it might be something to do with heat, but why it's just in them and not their relatives like emus, who are also getting pretty toasty, is not entirely clear.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is. And it's just such a unique element of this bird. And we're using all of these terms like beautiful and unique and special. But cassowaries have also been called dangerous and even called the world's most dangerous bird. So is this true? And can you tell us a little bit about what makes them so dangerous?
They've definitely got that reputation, haven't they? The interesting thing is, and it's obviously not to take anything away from this single instance, but there's only one known recorded incident of a person being killed by a cassowary in the wild in Australia. That was back in 1926, I believe, April the 6th, and it was a 13-year-old boy. It was two brothers, and they found an adult female, I believe it was, in their shed. She was just rummaging around doing cassowary things, and they panicked and they started to hit it with a pipe and a stick that they had in the shed. Then they ran away. And cassowaries have this strange response, like quite a lot of animals do. If you start running, they're like, okay, we're running. we're going to run with you. Unfortunately, the oldest boy tripped. And then the cassowary basically, I believe, kicked him from behind when he was face down on the ground. Ugh. And their claws, which are about 5 inches long, unfortunately happened to go into his jugular.
Wow.
Oh, boy.
So it's a very sad story. It is, they can't take anything away from that. That's a horrible thing to happen. The only
sad all round.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the only other instances are actually in the US, where people are legally allowed to just keep them as pets, like they can with chimps and other things. And like with chimps and other things, it often goes horribly wrong because it turns out these things are not really meant to be pets. But it's just the one wild example. There have been other injuries. But part of the issue at the moment is that people, I guess this is something that's persisting in many facets of our life, that that they see a cassowary on the beach, and rather than give it lots of space, they go up to it, get their phones out, try and video it close up. And what happens often is the light shines off the back of their phone, and cassowaries, like many birds, are just fascinated. They're nosy. So they start to approach to investigate. Then the people panic and run, and then the situation escalates really, really rapidly. So often some of these incidences where people have been injured, there's never incidents of a severe injury. I hate to say, I would say 90% of the time it's people not giving them the space and respect that they need as wild animals. And more people die a year from donkeys, etc., than cassowaries. So they're to be respected, but I believe all wildlife should be respected. I hate seeing this instant response of people just to touch it and fuss it and get a photo. I saw a kid actually. This is in Australia, in the south. They tried to put their toddler on a wild wombat to take a photo.
Ridiculous.
It's terrifying. I mean, wombat teeth are excellent at cutting through lots of stuff and digging. So they could take your finger off. Thankfully, this wombat just kind of rolled its eyes and wandered off. But
could have been a lot worse.
Well, it's like it could have been worse. Could have
been a lot worse.
Yeah, could have been a lot worse. Yeah, a lot worse. So the videos that I've seen of cassowaries starting to get tense with people, the people are 5-6 foot away, and you should never go up and approach a cassowary 5-6 foot away, like you shouldn't with most animals. So their reputation, I think, has potentially been exaggerated. It sounds quite a cool story, the world's most dangerous bird, and yes, it could inflict some amazing damage. Yet somehow, actually, the instances of death are just the one. So I imagine other birds in the world probably cause more deaths than cassowaries have.
Well, you raised that point about the livestock, for example. I read recently that cows kill more people than sharks, and I'm like, well, yeah, and that makes sense if you think about it, because where would a cow run into a shark?
Yeah.
But no, seriously, I have looked at a lot of statistics, and farm animals are far more dangerous than most of the scary animals we think of, because the circumstances in livestock management or in keeping enclosed animals, you're extraordinarily close to creatures that don't really want you there, and some of them are so big that they can just accidentally kill you. But cassowaries in particular, my grandfather had an emu for, I don't know, 10 or 12 years. And so Why
did I not know that?
Well, I think I may have told you, but it's a strange story because basically he found it running loose on his farm, and when he must have been 70, and he and a neighbor wrestled it into the pig pen, and guess what? It tore both of them up pretty bad with his claws. He didn't want to be wrestled into a pig pen, but he kept it, and he kept it for more than a decade as a pet.
Wow.
So it was a lovely, but it was a bit like having a dinosaur. I loved going to see it because its feet looked like a velociraptor, and I think the cassowary has the same sort of huge claws, and I assume that's partly for defense and partly for being able to dig around and find stuff, but they are incredibly intimidating looking creatures.
They are. They are, and they have like many of their close relatives, they have very big eyes, and they really they focus on you with both eyes at once, and you feel like you're sort of staring at something that's kind of, yeah, I guess maybe sort of sussing you out and contemplating options.
Oh, yeah, I looked at your research body, and I saw some of that was around stereo vision and different animals. Have you looked at that for the cassowary?
No, I whilst to work with many birds, I'm not convinced. I don't know what setup would be required to hold a cassowary still whilst I look in its eyes, and I need to be like half an inch away. So maybe that's something I would volunteer someone else.
Yeah, maybe.
Fair enough.
Paul Hogan do that thing with the fingers and staring, get him hypnotized. What?
Oh, yeah.
There's an 80s reference. Oh my God, I'm old. What?
I mean, they can run. I mean, they can run like 30 miles per hour. I mean, they will, if you're in a dense forest or even on a forest path, they will outrun you with ease, and they will outmaneuver you with ease. You know, they've got this amazing thing where they can crouch down, so their center of mass is really low to the ground. So they're really robust. You know, they're much better at that than, say, emus and rheas and ostriches. You know, they're just incredibly maneuverable.
Wow.
And they don't look. I don't like to be rude about ostriches and emus, but they can look a little ungainly sometimes. They can look a little. They could just kind of trip over at any moment, and you don't get that from a cassowary. They're far more. In that sense, as you've already mentioned, they look far more bipedal dinosaur-like, you know, because of how fast they can run and how low to the ground they crouch. So they can definitely look intimidating, but they're not out hunting people. You know?
As they make it sound.
Yeah, exactly. And when you go to these places, and I mean, maybe you've been up to North Queensland as well, Karen, if you're from sort of Australia. I appreciate Australia is the size of Europe, but
yeah.
The people there are not living in fear. That's something I noticed immediately. If you say to people, I really wouldn't mind seeing a cassowary, they're like, oh, well, I'll try here. They're not like, oh, you're all going to die. They're just like, oh, just don't walk up to it. Like, well, yeah.
Maybe to some people from overseas.
Yes.
Just to joke about it. But so part of the article that I read was about your personal quest to encounter a cassowary in the wild. So I have relatives in Queensland, but certainly not far north Queensland. It's more around the Sunshine Coast area. So go up a couple of 1,000 kilometres north, and that's where you would have gone. So can you tell us a little bit about this expedition, and did you find one?
So it had been a childhood sort of, I guess, passion, possibly obsession, to see wild cassowaries. And I think that partly was, I wonder if most children go through the dinosaur phase, and I certainly did from about the age of 5 to 9. It's part of growing up, isn't it?
Yeah.
And obviously, as we've discussed, there's not much alive today that looks more like a dinosaur than a cassowary. And, you know, zoos have their place at times, and I've seen cassowaries in zoos, but it's not the same experience as, I guess, like sort of researching them, reading up on them, and the field craft it takes to actually kind of track things down and in a way that you're not invading in their sort of personal space. And so I was in Australia for work, and then I sort of was able to separately at the end go up to Cairns because my work had taken me to Melbourne. And I had looked fondly at all these photos of these cassowaries on the beaches at Mission Beach. And it's such a unique place. I believe it's the only place in the world where tropical rainforest actually meets coral reef. You know, there's no gap between it. And that was also just something that I thought if I have the chance, I'd love to go and experience that. And I thought like maybe this might be my only chance. Obviously, Australia is quite a long way away from London. And so I just took myself up there for 4 days. I didn't have a car or a means to have a car. So I had to plan out kind of my walking routes well in advance. And I put lots of thought into how to find them and where to find them. And then I didn't really think beyond that. And it wasn't until my mum sort of said, oh, you know, she's pretty chilled, but she was like, oh, do you have a mobile phone signal when you're in the forest? I was like, no, there's no signal. Yeah. She was like,
good question.
Yeah. And she's like, are you planning to walk in advance? I was like, well, not exactly. I know roughly where I'm. She's like, and you're on your own? I was like, yeah. She's like, is there venomous snakes? Like, oh, yeah, there's loads of venomous snakes. And she was like, okay.
You need a plan.
Yeah. But for some reason, I think maybe I was just being quite single-minded, and I hadn't actually I mean, I've done lots of field work around the world. I'm very, very fortunate to have done that with work. And so I guess part of me is always aware of the dangers of certain, snakes and certain insects. And actually, I mean, you've probably experienced this, both coming from and living in countries with far more snakes than we have. It takes a lot to actually see a snake. I'd love to have seen more snakes in my life, and I've gone looking for snakes, and I never find snakes because they don't really like people, or they run away.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Yeah.
So I didn't see any snakes in Australia at all. I was quite disappointed. But so I took myself off to Mission Beach, which I've seen all these wonderful picture postcard like images of it, and it completely lives up to it. It really did. There's no filters on those photos that people are showing you of this amazing place. It honestly felt like paradise. It's a cheesy term, but it felt. I just sat there feeling quite content, and it was beautiful, and feeling very fortunate, really.
I've seen just a couple of snakes, maybe garden snakes, slithering in front of me, going on a hike. Once I encountered a brown snake, but it was a couple of feet away, and it was coiled up, just sleeping in the sun, and I just kept my distance. So yeah, it's absolutely true. I think people have the idea of Australia just being spiders and snakes everywhere. Everything's going to kill you, and it's not true.
No, I think when I was younger, I mean, a lot younger, this is the 70s and long before the internet, whatever, I think I had the same image of like certain sort of capital cities in African countries, had images of a pride of lions, like, walking down what would be the equivalent of our Oxford Street by the Houses of Parliament or something. And of course, yeah, and you go to these places and people are like, no, you have to like drive for hours, and then you have to like be super quiet, and you have to do, they're not just hanging every rafter and every tree.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm still amazed actually how people have that image of Australia. They kind of, oh no, you're not scared every time you like, get up in the morning. You're like, no, I'm in a house in a major city, and I love to see some wildlife other than the invasive introduced minor birds. And
I think it's just what you know, and if you haven't experienced it, then there are all the stereotypes that are out there.
Absolutely, and again though, often a lot of it's fueled now by social media. I keep seeing these clips of visitors to Australia on the beach having a look in rock pools and coming back with one of the blue-ringed octopus in their hand.
Oh, my God. No, that's terrifying.
No.
Just a quick insert here because we didn't explain it. A blue-ringed octopus is an incredibly venomous octopus. They're very small and pretty, but they carry enough toxin inside them to kill more than 20 people. Now, not a lot of people have died from handling them, but it's extraordinarily dangerous toxin. It's the same toxin that's in pufferfish, which I think we discussed in our coverage of zombies, but that's another story.
I'm terrified of them, and I've never stepped on one, fortunately, on the beach, but you see bits and pieces of them strewn around.
Yeah, you don't
very dangerous.
You don't want to. Yeah, it's this weird thing where people feel like they have the right to just, I mean, imagine if people did that to other people. Imagine if I just went to the beach and went along and like started like fussing someone and picking them up. I mean, they'd be like, "What the hell are you doing?" Like,
absolutely, yeah.
It's just weird how people do that, don't they? There's just this obsession with touching it and like,
yes,
yeah. I guess I get
instinct to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but the reason I love living in the UK is there's no animal here technically that can kill me unless I really commit to it and do something stupid like fall off a cliff or something. But when I go abroad, I'm not sticking my hands in leaf litter. I'm not putting my hand down tree cavities. You just have to be a little bit sensible about it, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. To reiterate what Karen said, we've lived in this house for 24 years. And I've seen 3 snakes. So wow. they were all very, very tiny. Like the American species, we have like pine snakes, which are 4 or 5 inches long, and then ring-tailed or ring-necked black snakes. They're little tiny things. We have garter snakes. We have lots of snakes. There's lots of snakes, but to see them is unusual. I found the skin of a 6-foot skin, which doesn't mean it was a 6-foot snake, but it was probably at least 5 feet. I put it on the back of my truck, and my wife came home and just started screaming. I was like, "It's just the skin." And she's like, No, we got to move. And I'm like,
But I will add too that you used to have a snake handling church down the street.
We did. When I was in my hometown, we had a snake handling church, and that was absolutely full toxin snakes. Yeah, I hope they milk them first. I'm not aware of any deaths there, but we actually had 2 within 20 miles of my home. Yeah, that was strange.
That's a different story.
Yeah.
Not out in the wild.
Cassowaries, they're important to the ecology. Are they thriving? Are they endangered? How are they doing?
I mean, they're having a terrible time. So there's 3 species of cassowary. You've got the dwarf cassowary, which is utterly adorable, and the northern cassowary, and those 2 are found in New Guinea, and then the southern cassowary, which is found in tropical Australia. And they think the numbers now are as low as 5,000 for the southern cassowaries, just left in total in the whole of Australia. And the 3 major problems for them are roads and the encroachment of roads, direct destruction of the forest, and invasive species like dogs and wild pigs. And the pigs are competitors. They're eating the same food, but also they eat the eggs. If they find if they find cassowary eggs, they will eat them. And the dogs are actually directly they will hunt the cassowaries in a pack. And there's not really in their evolutionary history a predator of cassowaries that would have been hunting them in packs. Even dingoes are relatively recent in the big scheme of things. If you're a cassowary, a species that's been around for 30 odd million years, whatever, and so they're not equipped to deal with a pack of dogs hunting them for hours and just constantly harassing them. And part of the huge problem in particularly the Mission Beach area and around there are these. The farmers have packs of dogs to keep out the pigs, ironically, because the pigs eat the crops. But these dogs, they don't have to be leashed and they don't have to be kept within a fenced area. They're just basically,
I was literally just talking to my kids about this, the dangers of packs of dogs yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's like
I was talking to my son about it. Yeah.
They can bring down, I mean, it's a big problem for farmers. They can bring down cows. I mean, they can bring down, and they do overkill sometimes where they'll just kill everything,
They just kind of get that kind of urge. I don't know, that sort of, they get excited by what's going on, and that they have had instances, and this is why it's so puzzling, because Australia, as you probably know, Karen, actually has quite strict dog laws. You're not allowed to own more than 2. It's actually good. I wish we had it in the UK. If you have dogs, you need to have a fenced garden. There's always strict laws, but there's nothing. They're only applying to urban areas and sort of private owners. And somehow farmers don't count as private owners. It's essential for their work or something. But they've had people attacked. They've had kids bitten. It's a real problem. But when I was there, I tried to sort of to chat with the locals, and they were such a lovely group of people, and people didn't really want to talk about it. It was interesting. I don't know if there was an undertone of, I don't know, people did not want to discuss the dog issue or the fact there had been attacks on people. They didn't feel comfortable talking about it, whereas they were very happy talking about the other issues of people speeding and hitting cassowaries and the feral pigs and stuff. So it's a complex thing, it's not one simple solution.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. I just maybe a lot of dog owners and they're protective about that.
I wonder if that was the case, yeah, because like all of Australia, there is still a First Nations tribe who are responsible for that area, and they still live in it. And they're saying that the dogs are a huge problem. They're being very vocal about it. These dogs, and the farmers, for fun, they also take their dogs out to hunt the pigs. So no one's intentionally hunting cassowary, as far as I'm aware now. It's all, I guess, bycatch, if you like. It's that's what makes it so complicated. And one thing was interesting was actually I was chatting to people in a pub there, and they were saying, most of them were saying how happy they are. Look where we live. We live somewhere with these amazing animals that people from all the world come and see, and I live here. How lucky am I? They have a really wonderful, positive attitude. And then there was this small subset who were like, I hate the cassowaries purely because of the speed restrictions on the roads around here. So they
really,
wow.
So it's insane, isn't it? So but then they all go, not that I stick to them anyway. I just drive how fast I want to drive. So it was quite a fascinating sort of human study as well. Chatting to people, and they very rapidly, because I was doing this all by foot, they were a bit like, are you okay? It's like, yeah. They'd see me kind of in these random spots, and they'd drive past. They'd be like, do you want to lift to town? I was like, no, I'm intentionally out walking, and they were just like, okay. And then by the second night, I was just like the weird English white dude, and people would come to me like, it's amazing. I guess it's not a massive community, so it's spread. They were like, oh. As soon as I went to like the bar, I said, "Oh, hello, can I have a pint of beer?" Because you sound so British when you're outside of Britain. You sound so, you go to America, you sound so ridiculously British and posh. So obviously, everyone in the pub was like, "Oh, you're the guy that's here to see a cassowary," and it's quite bizarre.
That's indeed the place to go. To the local pub, you'll find out everything. You'll meet everyone. Everyone will know about you within a couple of hours.
That's a pro tip, folks. The pub's not just for role-playing games. It's real life.
Yeah.
There's lots you can do. Yeah. And then the second day, actually, when I hadn't seen them, like these 3 separate random people, I was eating my dinner, just bought me a beer, like out of like, oh, bless you, sorry, you haven't seen one.
Oh, that's nice.
It's so nice, isn't it? Like, oh. Yeah. And then on the Sunday, I forgot about Sunday trading hours, or rather things might shut early.
Yeah.
And I didn't get out to the pub until about 8:30. And they said, "Oh, sorry, we stopped serving food at 8." And I didn't have any food back where I was staying. I think I'd done like 37,000 steps that day or something. And my face must have just looked like I was about to cry or something. Because don't worry, I've got a frozen pizza. I'll just go and stick it in the oven. And she just gave me this frozen pizza from her freezer.
Wow.
That's so cool. You'll get a lot of great communities just in remote parts of Australia where they really band together and sometimes can really reject people from somewhere else and at other times embrace them. And I think because you were there to see a cassowary, you were interested in their community and the ecosystem there. I think that they welcomed you with open arms.
Yeah, I think I also, by day 2, I looked so pathetic that I think they just took pity. Despite all the bug spray, I was covered in like mosquito bites. My feet looked like someone had grated them with a cheese grater. It was just. So I think they were just like, oh, bless this strange little man from England, and then, but yeah, and then on the last morning, they actually. There was a lady there. She's a cassowary expert, and they actually rung around, and some of the people like extended their morning driving commute and taking the kids to school and stuff just to see if they could find one on the road. And they were going to ring Ingrid, who's the cassowary lady there, to then take me to see it, which is just so unbelievably kind.
Yeah, really, that's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite. I took a lot away from it beyond just the nature.
A real adventure for you.
Absolutely.
Did you hear any local cassowary stories while you were there that were interesting? Or
I did, and some good, some bad, I guess. So feeding cassowaries is illegal now because there was a big cyclone in 2006, Cyclone Larry, and it took out a considerable amount of the rainforest. I mean, it was awful. I mean, thankfully no one died, but it flattened it basically, major chunks of it. And the cassowaries were starving to death. They really were. They were all going to die. So the locals started feeding them, and they were feeding them chopped fruits in their garden. There's no doubt that feeding period got them through until some of the forests had regenerated. But the problem was, what they found was, if someone had fed cassowaries, and they say they'd lived there for a decade, and they moved house, and then the new person came in, didn't feed cassowaries, the cassowaries were coming into that person's garden and getting aggressive because they're like, where's my breakfast? You fed me for 10 years. Like, what's going on? And also that the people were giving them non-native fruits, which isn't good for their health. And also was meaning that they were introducing exotic invasives into the forest because, of course, they would go to the toilet everywhere and you suddenly would have a passion fruit growing, whatever.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They smell good too. But yeah, they made it illegal, but a lot of people still do it. So I saw some gardens that were clearly, like basically like a giant fruit salad out just for the cassowaries.
Wow. Oh. Got to get up there and see it for myself someday. It is, as I said, it's quite some trek from the places I go to when I go back home. But you're painting a very interesting picture.
It's so worth it. There's this, I guess it's like a little sub-village called Carmu, and it's where I guess, trying to be polite, it's where I guess if you're quite wealthy, that's where you would live in that area. It's sort of the big houses, with the big gardens. And they are mainly the ones that are still feeding the cassowaries, and that's where people go for a walk around this estate, because that tends to be where your chances of seeing them are quite high. But it's causing problems because now, they go onto the beach and there's people just sat there watching the world go by, and the cassowaries approach them expecting food. So it's creating a real issue. And again, this is not unique to cassowaries. This is something that's happening with other animals around the world. And it's just bringing them into contact with people in a non-positive way. It's a tricky one to solve, because people go, oh, no, I don't feed the cassowaries. Yet when they have cassowaries that have been hit by cars, and it's a horrible number a year that are hit by cars, they always do an autopsy, and their stomachs are just full of exotic fruits, which are not found in. Yeah. Wow. So they are clearly still being
bit of a giveaway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very sad.
And, there was a guest house which on the quiet was offering for a fee photo opportunities in their garden, because they were accidentally leaving fruit out. And the cassowaries were regular visitors. So there was, I won't name the guest house, but they were flaunting the law like no tomorrow with that, and making money from it. So it's a really, really tricky scenario. It's not very often you have something of that size of the cassowary that is literally wandering around people's gardens and joining you on the beach. It's unusual. Yeah.
I mean, it's not from the etymology, but it really does have the word wary right there in the name. Be wary of them. I mean, enjoy them from a distance, but there's no reason to be engaging with them. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the government slogan is be cassowary.
Oh, is it really? Good for them.
And you know what? That actually sounds familiar now that you say that.
Yeah, on all the signs and they really, there's so many of the locals. There's a whole Facebook group which is like, if they see an individual being sighted regularly at one spot, it gets reported and the sign gets put there like a slow down. This is a frequent use.
Yeah.
So that there's a huge impetus by many there to save what they see as like their culture, and in particular, like I say, the First Nations there. We've lived alongside cassowaries for millennia, and there's a huge body of people there, but it's being undone at times by these dogs, by other decisions, by I can't remember the exact phrase, but I know there's disagreements between the state government and then the local government and the council, and all these.
It gets complicated.
Exactly, yeah, and it means that sometimes the non-ideal decision is reached rather than what the local people would want to happen, kind of thing. Right. So, but there's so many people are trying so hard to help them. It's not a case that people don't care; they do. It's just a small minority, like many things.
I think about Jurassic Park, and it's always the giant dinosaur running around and causing havoc. But the reality would be more like this, I think. People trying to keep them as pets, people complaining because they're having to change their behavior. Yeah, we kind of suck. But are there any are there any cassowary myths that you would like to see debunked?
That's a good question. Well, I guess the idea that they are dangerous in the same way that here we have red deer, for example, a large deer species, and the males have impressive antlers. And if I walked up to a wild red deer and stuck my face in its face, it would not be thrilled. It would respond by swishing its face at me and wanting me to go away. So I think that what I debunk about the cassowary is that they are aggressive, stalking humans and running riot through the streets of North Australia. And just to make people realize that they are solitary, they are timid, they largely do their best to avoid people. And if there are these interactions you see on social media, it's normally because people have either fed them or they are approaching them and scaring them or affronting them. And that's, I think, what I want to debunk. They are not evil, sort of nasty ninja birds which are attacking people. They are just trying to live their life in an area where they've been present for millions of years, and now suddenly it's chopped up with roads. There's these giant animals and packs trying to kill them, and these strange things on beaches offering them crisps, and think of what they're actually trying to deal with. And I think that would be what I want to debunk.
You say they're not ninjas, but they do sound like fruit ninjas.
They are fruit eaters for sure. I mean, that's the irony, isn't it? They've got this like 5-inch claw, which, goodness me, could literally go right through you almost. Yet they're fruit eaters. Yeah. So it's
it's just like gorillas and
and
the diets and how big they get.
Testing my memory, is it the pacu, the relative of the piranha that has the human-like teeth, but they only eat plants? Yeah. I think that's right.
There's so many bizarre instances like that, isn't there? And I mean, historically, I think that claw would have probably been for a defensive element, and that's largely to defend the young, because of course, the young are incredibly vulnerable when they first hatch. They're really small, and it's dad that does all the parental care. The female just lays the eggs and disappears, and that
aggressive.
I mean, she actually, a recent study showed that a female has a much larger territory than the males, and in her big territory there would be 5 male territories, if you like, and she will just spend the year wandering around. She'll spend a bit of time in territory 1 with, Bob the cassowary, and she'll lay some eggs with Bob, and then she'll move on, and then she'll go into number 2 with, Ted. She'll have about a month with Ted, and so it's really fascinating actually. The difference is quite role reversal compared to most species. She just lays the eggs and then she's off. So
fascinating. Steve, thank you so much for giving us a different perspective from what you'll find on YouTube and just social media, online in general. And just got a couple of questions to tie things up with you. But now that you've had this adventure and you've encountered a cassowary in the wild, what's next for you? What are you working on now?
That's a great question. So at the moment, actually, a lot of my research, my work-based stuff, as Blake mentioned, I study the eyes of birds and I try to understand how they see the world. And the reason we're doing that is to try and understand why certain species keep flying into human-made structures like wind turbines and power lines. And my current work is trying to work with energy companies to negate that, to try and solve the problem of the hundreds of thousands of birds which die through collisions a year worldwide. So that's what I've been up to, and that's involved a bit of travel to study birds that you don't typically find in zoos. So seabirds, for example, in the Seychelles was our last trip, and that's the current research focus for me.
Wow, it's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve, thank you so much for talking with us today. We do have our final signature question for first-time guests, and I think it's time to spring it on you. What is your favorite monster?
And that is a great question too. And I guess I'm like, how do you define a monster? I think I guess this isn't very original in a way, but there's an Australian one called the bunyip. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Oh, yes. We've talked about the bunyip.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. And that's one of my favorites. And it's because there's 2 things I like about it. One is this idea that perhaps how the First Nations share their history is through stories, and this is passed on through generations and generations. And the idea that perhaps the bunyip was actually a real extinct mega marsupial that lived, as they did many years ago. But also more recent stuff suggests that maybe some of it was cassowaries. They found written.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, so a written account where they discuss the fact that they found some bunyip eggs that were blue and shiny, which are cassowary eggs. So cassowaries have one of the shiniest eggs, along with tinamoos, these some crazy, crazy eggs. And it made me wonder if perhaps how cool would it be if actually they were also contributing to sort of some interesting legends and almost had their own monster equivalent, which I think would be pretty cool.
That is cool. Well, this was such a fun conversation, Steve. It was really great to bring you on and just pick your brains about this. And we'll have to keep in touch and bring you back on to talk about your other work at some time.
Sure. It's been really fun to discuss cassowaries. Always happy to chat cassowary.
Excellent. Thank you. Again, exactly as Kieran said, thank you so much. Hey, speaking of the bunyip, we did an episode a while back with Paul Michael Donovan from the Federation University of Australia. He had done some work on the indigenous bunyip stories and had made a pretty good case that it was actually an indigenous story of an encounter with a seal that had come. And I'll send you the link to that if you want to check it out. It's a pretty good story, and it sounded very plausible. Yeah,
I like the cassowary version.
I guess the thing is, it's like you would think indigenous people would sort of know that animal, but stories can be, they change over time. And sometimes a repeated story, they lose their context. All kinds of things happen. So hard to say. But
I think studies have showed that seals are actually, they're going sort of further up rivers than they have before in Australia. So actually they are perhaps, in the last 100, 200 years, popping up in places they wouldn't have 500 years ago. So maybe at the time there was a bit of a mystery and, a strange thing with weird eyes that makes odd noises. Yeah. And, you can see how it would, cause puzzlement if it's not something you'd encountered before.
Well, and the other part, it's a mystery creature, and they were probably quite rare, and they were probably wiped out by the drop bears. So,
Well, there you go. We've got it all sewn up.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
My pleasure. Nice to chat to you both.
Monster Talk.
You've been listening to Monster Talk, the science show about monsters. I'm Blake Smith.
And I'm Karen Stolzno.
You just heard an interview with Steve Portugal about the amazing birds, the cassowaries. A link to the article about Steve's hunt for this bird is in the show notes, along with some other links for further reading, including some writing by friend of the show, Darren Naish, who's also fascinated by these beautiful birds with their fearsome appearance. Check out those show notes. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Monster Talk. Each episode, we strive to bring you the very best in monster-related content with a focus on bringing scientific skepticism into the conversation. If you enjoy Monster Talk, we now have a variety of ways to support the show, all with convenient links at monstertalk.org/support. That's monstertalk.org/support. We have links there to our Patreon page as well as a donation button. Another great way to support the show is to buy books from our Amazon Monster Talk wish list, which directly helps us with our research. We love used books very much, so don't feel compelled to buy new ones, and we love Kindle so we can share our digital libraries with each other. And finally, without spending any money at all, you can support us by leaving a positive review at iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Positive reviews help keep us visible in iTunes, which is a great way to help us find new listeners. And please share our show on your favorite social media platforms. Monster Talk theme music is by Peach Stealing Monkeys, and we thank you for spending time with us this week. It was monstrously fun.
This has been a Monster House presentation.